Hello, I am Dr. Steve Johnson, and today I want to cover a very important issue: betrayal. Betrayal can produce an extraordinary range of reactions: anger, anxiety, grief, disgust, shame, suspicion, the urge to confront, the urge to withdraw, replaying conversations, searching for details, checking phones or social media, difficulty concentrating, trouble sleeping. Sometimes people are surprised by the intensity of their own reactions. They may say, "Why can't I stop thinking about this?" Or, "Why am I still so angry?" Or even, "Why am I behaving like someone I don't recognize?" One useful way of answering those questions is to look at betrayal from both an evolutionary and a neuropsychological perspective. And then we can ask a more practical question. Given what the brain is doing, how can we help someone respond differently? That is where approaches such as rational emotive behavior therapy, or REBT, and dialectical behavior therapy, or DBT, can become especially useful. Betrayal as an evolutionary problem. Human beings survive through cooperation. Throughout our evolutionary history, other people have provided protection, food, and other resources, information about danger, assistance with raising children, sexual partnership, companionship, and membership in a group. Depending upon another person, then, can mean depending upon that person to share resources, protect children, provide accurate information, honor agreements, remain available during danger or illness, or cooperate in activities that neither person could manage as effectively alone. That cooperation can be enormously valuable, but it also creates vulnerability. Imagine depending upon someone to share food during scarcity and discovering that they have secretly kept it for themselves, or relying upon another person to warn you about danger and discovering that they deliberately withheld the information, or investing years of effort and resources in a partnership while the other person secretly directs time, sexual involvement, money, or other resources elsewhere. Ignoring deception in situations like these could historically have carried significant costs: loss of resources, exposure to physical danger, loss of reproductive opportunities, compromised care of children, exploitation by others, or exclusion from important cooperative relationships. Modern betrayal usually occurs under very different circumstances, but we have inherited brains that are highly responsive to violations involving trust, reciprocity, fairness, and deception. From that perspective, some reactions following betrayal become more understandable. Anger can mobilize us to confront a violation or establish a boundary. Suspicion can increase attention to possible deception. Rumination can begin as an attempt to understand what happened and prevent it from happening again. And temporarily stepping away from a highly charged interaction can prevent someone from saying or doing something impulsive while emotional arousal is extremely high. That last point is important. Stepping away from an interaction for 20 minutes because you are afraid you may scream, threaten, break something, or say something deliberately cruel is different from spending the next 6 months avoiding difficult conversations, intimacy, restaurants, social events, or anything else associated with the betrayal. One is a deliberate regulation strategy. The other can gradually restrict someone's life, and that distinction will become important when we talk about DBT. When the betrayal detection system stays activated, after discovering a betrayal, information that previously seemed harmless may acquire entirely new significance. A late arrival home, a text notification, a particular restaurant, a business trip, a name, a facial expression, a gap in someone's explanation. The brain is constantly predicting, detecting patterns, and updating its models of the world. Betrayal provides powerful evidence that an important model may have been wrong. I thought I understood what was happening, and apparently I didn't. That creates uncertainty, and uncertainty encourages additional monitoring. Attention may become increasingly directed toward potentially relevant cues. Memories may be repeatedly retrieved. The person may mentally reconstruct timelines and conversations. What happened that Tuesday? Was that really a business trip? Why did they say that? What else did I miss? This helps explain why rumination following betrayal can feel so compelling. The brain is attempting to reduce uncertainty and prevent another unpleasant surprise. But there is an important problem. Thinking longer does not necessarily produce better information. At some point, reviewing Tuesday afternoon for the 50th time is no longer producing anything new. Yet the brain may continue behaving as though one more examination will finally produce certainty. That is where a potentially adaptive monitoring system can become extraordinarily costly in everyday life. Anger deserves more attention. One aspect of betrayal treatment that deserves particular attention is anger. From an REBT perspective, I find it useful to distinguish between two forms of anger: frustration-based anger and ego-based anger. Frustration-based anger often centers on the obstruction of something the person strongly wants. I wanted honesty. I wanted fidelity. I wanted the relationship we agreed to have. I wanted to be able to trust what I was being told. The person moves from strongly wanting these things to demanding them. They absolutely had to treat me differently. This absolutely should not have happened. That demandingness can help transform understandable disappointment, hurt, and frustration into sustained, unhealthy anger. Ego-based anger adds global evaluation of the other person. They didn't simply lie to me. They're a liar. They didn't behave terribly. They are terrible. They're worthless. They're disgusting. They're a horrible human being. The distinction matters clinically because the interventions differ. With frustration-based anger, we can work particularly with demandingness, awfulizing, and frustration intolerance. With ego-based anger, unconditional other acceptance becomes especially relevant, and neither intervention requires minimizing what the person actually did. When anger begins directing behavior. Anger also has behavioral consequences. Someone may repeatedly interrogate a partner after the conversation has stopped producing anything useful. They may send angry text messages throughout the workday. They may repeatedly check a partner's location or social media. They may bring up the betrayal during unrelated disagreements. They may insult the partner, retaliate, threaten separation during an argument without actually having decided to separate, contact the third party impulsively, or deliberately say something intended to hurt because they want the other person to experience some portion of their own pain. The question isn't simply whether the anger is justified. A much more useful question is, when you act on your anger this way, what happens next? Does it produce the relationship the person wants? Does it help them behave like the person they want to be? Or does it produce another argument, another night without sleep, another day of monitoring, and another interaction that both people later regret? That begins moving treatment from whether the person has a right to be angry toward what they want to do with that anger. Separate the inference from the belief. This distinction is especially important in REBT. Suppose someone says, "My partner lied to me." That is an inference about reality. It may be very strongly warranted by the available evidence. It may be weakly warranted. Additional evidence may make the inference more or less warranted, but it is not yet the irrational belief. The belief may be, because my partner lied to me, they absolutely should not have done that. I cannot stand knowing this happened. This betrayal proves that my partner is a completely rotten person. Because I trusted them and was deceived, I am a fool. I must know everything that happened before I can move forward. I need certainty that this can never happen again. Those are different claims, and they should not be collapsed together. We don't dispute the betrayal simply because we're doing REBT. Instead, we examine what the person believes about the betrayal, from demandingness to preference and action. Consider, my partner absolutely should not have betrayed me. REBT isn't asking the person to decide that betrayal is acceptable. Instead, we can help transform the demand into a strong preference. I very strongly wish that my partner had not betrayed me. I believe what happened was seriously wrong, but there is no law of the universe requiring another person to behave according to my values. But stopping there isn't enough. What are you going to do because this matters to you? If honesty is extremely important to you, perhaps you clearly state what honesty would look like going forward. If you want the relationship to continue, perhaps you describe what behaviors would make rebuilding trust possible. If there are behaviors you will no longer accept, perhaps you communicate and act upon those boundaries. If you decide that remaining in the relationship is inconsistent with what you want for your life, you can begin acting upon that decision. A preference isn't passive. I strongly want this relationship to be different becomes clinically useful when followed by, so what am I willing to do to help make it different? Unconditional other acceptance. Unconditional other acceptance is sometimes misunderstood as forgiveness. It isn't. It does not mean approving of someone's behavior. It does not mean trusting them. It does not mean staying married. It does not mean dropping boundaries. And it certainly does not mean pretending the betrayal wasn't serious. It means refusing to convert a judgment about behavior into a total judgment of a human being. My partner did something I consider terribly wrong is different from, my partner is a completely worthless human being. That distinction can reduce ego-based anger without requiring moral indifference. You can hold someone accountable without globally condemning them. Unconditional self-acceptance. Betrayed partners sometimes turn the event against themselves. How could I have been so stupid? I should have known. I was a fool. What's wrong with me that I didn't see this? Again, notice the leap. I did not recognize the deception is a statement about what happened. I am stupid is a global evaluation of the self. Unconditional self-acceptance challenges that move. Perhaps I missed something. Perhaps I trusted someone who deceived me. Perhaps looking backward, I can identify things I wish I had noticed. None of those facts provides a rational basis for assigning a global rating to myself as a human being. Rumination. What is this thinking doing? With betrayal-related rumination, I might ask, you've been thinking about this for the last 20 minutes. What changed as a result? Or, is this helping you decide what to do, or are you going through the same material again? Or even, if you think about this for another hour tonight, what do you predict will be different at the end of that hour? These questions shift attention away from the content of every thought and toward the function of the thinking itself. The person may notice, I keep replaying it, but I'm not reaching a different conclusion. I keep asking questions, but every answer creates another question. I keep checking, but the relief lasts 10 minutes. That discovery creates an opportunity to practice doing something different, not because the questions are illegitimate, but because repeatedly pursuing them may be consuming time and energy that could instead go toward emotional regulation, sleep, work, relationships, recreation, decision-making, and rebuilding everyday life. DBT, when emotional arousal becomes very high. Very high emotional arousal can look quite concrete. The person's heart is racing, their muscles tighten, their voice becomes louder or faster. They begin pacing. They repeatedly interrupt. They send 6 texts before receiving an answer to the first one. Their thinking narrows. They describe feeling as though they have to do something right now. They may know intellectually that screaming, threatening, checking, or sending another message will probably make matters worse. Yet the urge to act feels overwhelming. This is often not the best moment for extensive cognitive work. By cognitive work, I mean carefully identifying an inference, distinguishing it from a belief, examining demandingness, considering alternative beliefs, evaluating evidence, or thoughtfully considering longer-term consequences. The person may be too physiologically activated to do that well, so first we help reduce the intensity enough to create room for choice. For example, instead of telling someone simply to calm down, We might have them sit with both feet firmly on the floor. Breathe in slowly, then breathe out somewhat longer than they breathed in. Repeat it several times without forcing an unnaturally deep breath. Notice the chair underneath them. Identify what they can see in the room. Feel their feet against the floor. Put the phone on the table rather than holding it while deciding whether to send the message. And then ask, what are you feeling the urge to do? Not, what are you going to do? Those are different questions. I have an urge to send this text is not the same statement as I have decided to send this text. Creating even a small space between urge and action can radically change what happens next. Temporary distance is different from avoiding life. I prefer to distinguish purposeful temporary distance from avoidance. Suppose an argument about the betrayal becomes increasingly heated. One partner notices that they are shouting, interrupting, and no longer listening. They might say, I want to continue this conversation, but I'm too angry to do it constructively right now. I'm going to take 30 minutes and come back at 8 o'clock. That is not abandoning the conversation. The return is part of the strategy. During those 30 minutes, the goal isn't to sit in another room rehearsing everything the partner has done wrong. The person might walk, breathe, listen to music, shower, make coffee, or engage in another activity that reduces arousal. And at 8 o'clock, they return. Contrast that with gradually eliminating more and more parts of life because they evoke painful thoughts or emotions. I won't go to that restaurant anymore. I don't want to see those friends because they knew us before this happened. I won't travel. I don't want to have difficult conversations. I don't want to be physically close because it might bring everything back. I stopped doing the things I used to enjoy because I don't feel like myself anymore. Now, the practical question becomes much simpler. What have you stopped doing since this happened that you would like to start doing again? Perhaps dinner with friends, going to the gym, sleeping in the same room, taking a trip, having sex, going to a favorite restaurant, laughing together, spending an evening without discussing the betrayal. The next step is not stop avoiding. It is selecting one of those activities and beginning to reintroduce it deliberately at a manageable pace. That gives treatment a behavioral direction. Resentment reduction. Resentment often involves repeatedly prosecuting the same case internally, and the evidence may be completely accurate, but there is an important question. How many times does the case need to be tried? The goal isn't to prove that the betrayal didn't matter. Instead, we can examine what repeatedly prosecuting the case is doing today. Is it changing the past? Is it changing the partner? Is it helping the person decide what to do? Or is it keeping their body activated, interfering with sleep, pulling attention away from work, and turning otherwise pleasant interactions into another opportunity to revisit the betrayal? REBT can address demandingness, awfulizing, frustration intolerance, and global evaluations. DBT can help the person notice emotional escalation, tolerate strong affect without impulsive action, and choose behaviors more deliberately. And then behavioral practice becomes essential. The person practices not reopening the case during an unrelated disagreement. They postpone sending the angry text. They return to the activity they abandoned. They have dinner without conducting another interrogation. They notice resentment and then deliberately choose what they want to do next. What do you want your life and relationship to look like? Eventually, I want to move from what happened toward another set of questions. What do you want your life to look like now? And if the relationship is continuing, who do you want to be in this relationship? What would you like an ordinary Tuesday evening together to look like? How would the two of you disagree differently? What would you like to be doing together 6 months from now that you're not doing now? How would you like to respond the next time you're reminded of the betrayal? What would being a good partner look like in your behavior, not your intentions? These questions give us something concrete to build. Perhaps they want to have dinner without checking a phone, talk about difficult subjects without screaming, resume sexual intimacy gradually, take trips again, spend time with friends, laugh together, be able to express anger without deliberately hurting one another, ask a question once and listen to the answer, go an entire evening without discussing the betrayal, or decide thoughtfully that the relationship will end and behave toward one another with as much dignity as possible while that occurs. Now, treatment isn't organized primarily around reducing symptoms. It is also about building behaviors that resemble the life and relationship the person actually wants, from understanding to learning. How to respond. Understanding why betrayal produces such powerful reactions can be useful, but understanding alone rarely changes behavior. It may be more helpful for someone to learn how to experience anger without immediately attacking, how to notice an urge without automatically acting upon it, how to tolerate uncertainty without repeatedly checking, how to remember the betrayal without spending hours rehearsing it, and how to begin doing again the things that make life larger rather than smaller. For couples who decide to remain together, improving connection may involve equally concrete behaviors. Returning to difficult conversations after taking temporary distance, listening long enough to understand before responding, expressing anger without global condemnation, following through consistently on agreements, making room for enjoyable experiences that have nothing to do with the betrayal, gradually restoring affection, sexuality, companionship, humor, and ordinary daily life when both partners want those things. The betrayal remains part of their history. Anger may still arise. Memories may still appear. Uncertainty may never disappear completely. But something important can change. The person learns how to notice anger and choose what to do with it, how to recognize rumination and redirect attention, how to tolerate frustration rather than demanding that reality be different, how to condemn harmful behavior without condemning an entire person, how to experience a powerful urge without obeying it, and how to repeatedly practice behaviors that move life and, when desired, the relationship towards something they actually want. That is where evolutionary psychology, neuropsychology, REBT, and DBT can converge. They can help explain why betrayal evokes such powerful emotional and behavioral responses. And more importantly, they can give us practical ways to help people learn what to do when those responses occur.